Good morning, everybody. This is Bob Coppedge, and welcome to the 10th, yes, 10th of Simplex-IT's free monthly webinars dealing with Office. Michelle Vogel and I are here, and one of us actually knows something about the topic we're going to talk about, which is Visio 2013. Now, a couple real quick notes. One is, as we point out, audio is on your computer only. And we're actually going to get rid of the XP slide. Hopefully nobody's still doing that. We have found a couple of other issues that some people have had with audio, but if you have problems, either email support@simplex-it.com or give us a call, 234-382-1277. We'll help you if we can. If not, we'll be putting these webinars up on YouTube channel. We did get a little behind, and by we, I mean me. All of the past couple months webinars are finally up online, and you'll be receiving an email probably tomorrow with the instructions for the last couple. So shame on me. One thing I did want to talk about is one of the things that we are now doing is we have started a new training offer. If you like what's happening here and you're actually getting value out of the topics that Michelle is presenting for you, but you may actually have a need or a desire to learn things more specific, we've got this, what we think is a pretty cool program where essentially you can get a 2-hour online session with Michelle where you pick the topics ahead of time. So if you're having issues with, let's say, mail merge, or you're trying to put some pizzazz in PowerPoint, or you have a group of people that you want to do some training on Excel, instead of spending a whole day at a class or reading a book, you can actually focus on what specific topics you want to talk about. And Michelle, who's obviously very knowledgeable in all this stuff, certainly compared to me anyway. No, but essentially we think it's a great focused way for you to pick up some cool knowledge. So we're going to be doing these at $250 a pop. As we're just starting to kick this out and see how well it works for people, for the first month or so, we're going to do these at $150. So if you're interested in that, give us a holler, bob@simplex-it.com, and we'll arrange something. We think this is a good deal, but we'd be interested in some feedback from you guys. So just some topics that we've got coming up. Next 4 months, we've got pretty much laid out already with managing your email with Outlook. We know that's a big issue. And then we're going to get back to some basics with Excel and PowerPoint. And then in January, we're going to get back to some of the cool stuff with data in Excel. And then also, don't forget about our LUNCHINARs. Next week, we're actually going to get a little bit on the geeky side with servers in the cloud, but it's going to be more from a management perspective. So don't let the topic fool you. We think that's going to be pretty useful for why would businesses put servers in the cloud. Then we do our IT obsoletes, and you can see the rest of them. Again, all of these, the webinars, the LUNCHINARs, they're free, they're open to the public. It's just Simplex-IT, our dedication to actually educating people as opposed to just folding these back as like secrets or something along those lines. And that's pretty much the information that we've got, and without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Michelle.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the Visio Getting Started 2013. If you have 2010, be aware that most of these features that I'm going to show today do work. I will also mention to you if there's a feature in 13 that 10 does not have. So to get started, I've opened up Microsoft Visio. Visio has 2 versions of it. It has a standard package and a professional package. Of course, with the professional package, you're going to get a lot more diagrams. So if you are interested in using that version, it's more expensive. The standard version will give you less diagrams, but you still will be able to do flow charts and organizational charts. You just don't have as many diagrams as you do in the professional. So to get started, I've opened up 2013, and 2013, if you're familiar, always opens up in the template window. With Visio, it's the one program where you actually do want to use their templates, because those templates will come with stencils, which I'll explain in a minute. And as you can see, the many different diagrams that come with it, those diagrams have unique features to them. So depending on what diagram you pick, If you pick, say, the organizational chart diagram, it will have an organizational chart ribbon where you can do certain commands to update your org chart. So up here, I can click on the different categories such as business, and it would just bring up the business diagrams, such as the basic diagram. You notice that there's some marketing charts diagrams, there's cause and effect, there's brainstorming. Of course, today I can't cover all the diagrams in this program. I will try to do another webinar next time, that when we do Visio, that will cover some more diagrams in detail. Today's class, we're going to start off with some basic working with shapes things, and then we're going to do flowchart and org chart. May go a little over, so please stick around and hang on for those. So I'm going to go home. As you can see, there's maps, there's floor plans, there's software, and that's the other thing, the type of diagrams that you get. As you can see, this is the full version, because you have engineering, you have the database. If you didn't, a lot of these, some of these categories would not be there. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the basic diagram template, and I'm going to, now it does say metric or US. Fortunately, it does default to US. If you want metric, you can choose that, but I'm going to hit US, hit create. I don't have to hit it, it comes up automatically. Now I have the diagram here. I have the ribbons up at the top, so as we go through, I'll be covering some of the stuff on some of the ribbons. You have your quick access toolbar. If you notice that you can, open, you can add open, you can add the save, you could have spell check, quick print, you can even go to more commands. You can then go to all commands, and you can add other commands from here that are listed in alphabetical order. You can also show it below the ribbon so that it appears right here. It will make your screen a little smaller, but it'll have easy access to the buttons that you put on there. So just like the other programs, there's going to be some buttons later that I'm going to add to this that are not on the ribbon, but they're very, very useful buttons. When you pick a diagram, you'll notice that you have over here a listing of shapes, and these are called stencils. And the stencils are a collection of shapes. Basically, you will see that depending on what version you have, if you have 2013, they've added some more shapes that go with some of the templates. And for instance, this one has some arrow shapes that you can choose from, some decorative shapes that you can choose from, some graph and math shapes that come with this particular diagram. Also, on the basic shape stencil, you will notice that there's a line separating some shapes from the top and shapes at the bottom. And that is called the quick shapes. There's a quick shapes button right here. If I click on it, it actually shows me only the shapes that are above that line. So this is for when you want to access shapes quickly. So with that in mind, if I go back to basic shapes to bring up all of them, you can actually move the shapes from the top to the bottom. So for instance, if I like the star here and I want to use this 7-point star all the time, I drag it above the line. It becomes part of the quick shapes. When I click on it, it's only showing me the shapes I need. So if there's certain shapes that you use all the time, whether you're in a flow chart or an org chart, you can put those above the line. You can take shapes out of here and drag them below the line if you want. And so you can actually customize this for yourself. So the quick shapes is for you to eliminate all the other shapes below and just see the ones that you use. And as you can see, it also does it for the arrow shape stencil, the decorative shape stencil, and the graph and math shape stencil. So it only shows you those shapes above the line. I'm going to go back and click on the basic shape stencil. Then I can float a stencil. And what you can do if I want to is right click, and then I can actually float the window, and then I can take it and I can just drag it wherever I want. So I can snap it And actually, you should just be able to take it and drag it anyways without floating. But what floating does is allows you to put your stencils, if there are two stencils that you use a lot, and you want to use the shapes from here and over here, instead of keep clicking over here to show that stencil, you can have one stencil here, another stencil over here. And then if I want, I could just take it, snap it back over to the left. And then you can take, now in the older versions, you used to be able to snap them to the top and the bottom also, but it appears that that is no longer the case. But as you can see, by dragging them, you can also split the window on the left and have one box at the top and one box at the bottom, so you can also do it that way too. And then that way it would just give you more stencils to have available to you. Also, the other thing that you can do is that where it says more shapes, if you click on that and you go over here, those templates that I was talking about, they have stencils that come just with that template. But if you want a stencil from another template, you can bring it into this diagram here. So if I go to more shapes, and I go down to, say, maps and floor plans, and then I go over to map, and then I hit landmark shapes. That is going to bring up the stencil from the map diagram template. Now, if you're just starting to use Visio for the first time, you may have to get into the templates yourself to see what kind of stencils are out there. And once you become familiar with them, you'll know where to go to grab them. But as you can see, once I bring those in, I can take that stencil and that shape and drag it onto my diagram. And I'm actually using that shape from another stencil or another diagram, and so I can use it. And then later, which I won't get into right now, but you can create your own stencil, and you can actually put like your logos on there and any shapes that you create or use. So backgrounds, you can do all kinds of things on there, and then bring that stencil up when you're in diagrams to use those objects and access them quickly instead of always searching for them. If you're not sure what stencil or what shape is on a stencil, or if it even exists, they do have a search box right here that you can click on and then type inside. So if I type star and hit enter, it's going to search all of the stencils that are out in Visio, and it's going to pull in the stars. So then I could take that shape and drag it out, and then if you have to size it, you can size it, and then you can just move it out if you want. The other thing you can do with this if you want is you can see how you have all the stars on here, and you could drag it off and then put that if you want. Now there's more results too that I could click on to see if there's any other stars out there. And so you have a search box, and then you also have a stencils, which brings up the stencils. Now, if for some reason you hit this arrow here, it just hides the wording over on the left and just shows you a quick bar with the shapes that you want, with a little scroll bar, little arrow down here, and you're just looking at the shapes from that particular stencil. And then you can click on this button here, and you can actually pick another stencil, and it would just show you the shapes over here without taking up that much space. If you click on the arrow again, it expands out so you can also see the search box if you need. And then there's a little scroll bar that appears here the more shapes you have, though you can drag this line down to see all of the stencils that come with that diagram. Now, if I close this particular diagram, and I'm having a little trouble with my mouse today. If I close that, and I'm not going to save it, I'm going to go to File. And, you know, sometimes if you remember, as I mentioned, the new button here, that's the only time I don't like the new button on there, unless it's something you want to do. But if you do hit the new button, you get a blank paper, but you don't get stencils. That's what I was saying. Visio is the one program where you actually want to use their templates. So I'm actually going to close this one, and I'm going to go back to File. I'm going to go to New, which will take me to the template window, and I'm going to click on the basic diagram again to create that, bring up the page, bring up the stencils on the left. Now, I'm going to take the triangle and drag it onto the page. And basically, when you're sizing your shapes, you can go to the corners so it doesn't distort the image. If you hold your Shift key down and you drag the corners, then it will not distort the image either. And you can then click on any square surrounding the image. Or if you do want to change the look of the image, then you can just click on to make it skinnier or make it wider or smaller, whatever you want to do. Sometimes an image will have a yellow square. If you put your mouse on the yellow square, you can actually change the image by dragging that square, and it actually takes that image and changes it depending on what type of image it is. So, and then you also have the rotate button where you can actually take the image and you can rotate that image. If you have the image selected, you can just type inside of it and click away. And any image that you want, depending on what type of image, you're either going to type inside of it, or if it's, say, a network diagram, sometimes those diagrams will appear, the text will appear to the right of the diagram. For instance, if I go back here and let's say I go back to the map and the landmark shapes that I had up earlier, and I bring up the stadium, and let's say that I type. Notice that when I type, the text appears underneath the shape. When I click on it, there's a little yellow square where my text is. If I put my mouse on top of that, I can take the text and I can actually move it to around the shape. So if I want to put it here or up here or right here to the right of it, so I'm not stuck as to where that text appears, but it's not, and I can even, if I wanted to, move it inside if I wanted to move it inside. So certain shapes, the text will go outside of the shape, and other shapes, it'll go inside. It just depends on what the shape is. If you want to format the shape, then notice that I select the shape. I go to the Format ribbon on the Home tab, and if I want, I can make it bold. I can make it bigger with the big A. I can change the font color if I want. I can also, there's a button here to rotate in the paragraph section of the Home ribbon. I can rotate the text just by clicking on it. It'll flip it in 4 different directions. And if I wanted to, I could also click on the text block button. Notice how all of a sudden the square is only around the text. I can put my mouse on the rotate button, and I could also rotate it too if I wanted to angle it a different way. But now that I've clicked on the rotate button, you'll notice that my mouse is no longer a pointer tool. And that's very important. So there's a couple things you can do. One, you can click on the pointer tool button up here to turn it back into an arrow, or you can hold your control key down and hit the number 1, and that will turn it back to a pointer tool. And you use the pointer tool to help you select the objects on the screen. So you want to make sure that it's a pointer tool, because certain buttons that you click on in the tools section will stay that way. They won't go back to the pointer tool unless you tell it to. So such as the connector or the text box, they will stay that way until you hit the control 1 or the number 1, or you hit the pointer tool button. I'm going to delete this diagram right now. And now I'm going to put some shapes on. I'm going to go back to the basic shape, and I'm going to put some shapes on my page. So I'm just going to change, I'm going to drag the rectangle, I'm going to drag the square. Now notice as I'm dragging the shapes on the page, there is a guide or an imaginary line that appears to help me line up the shapes. So as I'm dragging them on, if I'm not sure that they're lining up, this guide or grid that appears is actually going to help me So when I'm dragging them across, it's now helping me line up with visually without having to worry. Now there's other ways of lining up your shapes, so I'm just going to put a couple in here and just kind of keep them off kilter just a little bit. All right. Now I've got 6 shapes on my page. I'm going to talk about selecting your shapes. What I'm going to do is when you want to select a shape, you click on the first one, and then you can hold your shift key down and you can select the second one. You can drag over the shapes that you want to select. In 2010, you have a pink square around the shapes. In 2013, you have black. But here's the thing about selecting shapes. If I click on the square and then hold my shift or control, it doesn't matter because the shift and the control key both will select non-adjacent shapes. If I select the star, notice that those are the only 2 shapes that have a thicker box around them. And that's important because even though it looks like the square and circle are part of this, if I go to fill, which is for shapes, and I pick a color, notice that it's only affecting the 2 shapes that are actually selected. Or if I go in the corner and size the shapes, it's only sizing the 2 that are selected. So if I wanted all 4 shapes, I would have to click and drag over them, and now they're all selected. But if I want to select non-adjacent, I click on one, hold the shift or control key down, and now those 2 are the only 2 selected, even though there's a box around all 6 shapes. So visually, you have to pay attention to the shapes that have the thicker border around them. Control A will select all the shapes, and you can actually then, size the whole diagram if you want. Another button, there's 2 buttons that are very important that we're going to add to the quick access toolbar. So I'm going to go to the drop down arrow. I'm going to go to more commands. I'm going to go to all commands. And the buttons that I'm looking for is the first one is called the center drawing. So if I type the letter C and I scroll up, there's a center drawing command that I'm going to add to the quick access toolbar. And then the other one that I like, and it's right in the C section also, it's called Connect Shapes, which is another way of connecting your shapes. So it's right here, and I'm going to double click on that and send it to the right. I'm going to hit OK. And the reason I like the center drawing button, watch what happens when I click on it. It centers the whole drawing. You don't have to select it. It doesn't matter whether it's a flow chart, an org chart, whatever type of drawing it is. If you want to make sure that it's centered on the page, click that button. You won't find it on the ribbon, so you only find it in the quick access toolbar. And it's a command that used to exist in the older versions. They just don't have it. And it's an important button to me, so I like to have it on the, I like to use it. So now I'm going to select the first column of shapes, and basically if I go to, before I do that though, I'm going to have you go to the view ribbon, and what I'm going to do is you'll notice that if your ruler's not showing, you want to make sure that you check the ruler box. In 2013 you don't see the grid, but if I check the grid box, the grid appears. In 2010 you will see the grid. Then you'll notice in the corner here where it says show, if I click on that, the dialog box comes up, and you can actually change the grid here. So if I put 2 inches all the way around and hit OK, notice how large the grid pattern is in the background. Now the grids don't print. It's just for you to help you line things up if you want to use it. And as you drag, you'll notice that you have the little snap button that actually snaps it to that grid. So if you wanted to make it larger or change it, you can. There's a task pane button here. If you click on it, you have shapes. That's if the shapes completely disappear. Go to view, go to task pane, and hit the shapes button, and it'll reappear. Sometimes it happens, you don't know what you did, and it disappears. Then you also have the pan and zoom buttons, which will help you drag to zoom in and out, which is kind of nice. You also have the zoom buttons down here that you can zoom in and out if you need to. And you also have a button here which is called Fit to Page. So if you do get it too large and you want to get it fit to page quickly, so it goes back to the screen so you can see the whole diagram, that's a good button too. And then up here, you also have the size and position. So depending on what shape you have selected, you can adjust the width, the height, and you can work with that and keep that locked in to the left if you want. Now, the other thing that helps you align shapes is the guide. And to bring up guides, I'm going to actually hide the grid for now. I'm going to uncheck it. To bring up the guides, you just move your mouse up into the ruler. So that's why the ruler is very important. You click and you drag, and automatically you get a guide. You can also bring in as many guides as you want. You can bring up horizontal and vertical guides. I'm having trouble talking today. And you can use those guides to help you line your objects up. So notice as I drag my square and I drag my rectangles, I get a little green box that tells me that it's snapping to that guide that I just brought in. On the visual aids section here on the view ribbon, if I click on that button, I can undo the snap and glue, and then it'll freely just move on the page. But if you are going to use the guides, you want to keep the snap and glue on because that helps you line it up to that actual guide that you brought up. If you want to delete them, just select the guide. It'll turn dark. Just hit your delete key on your keyboard and those guides will disappear. So those are nice features to use when you're working with shapes. Now remember, everything that I'm showing you right now, even though this is just a bunch of shapes on a page and we're working with it, you can apply all of this to your actual flowcharts and organizational charts and diagrams that you're working with. So that's why I'm kind of going over these basics for you so that you can see how to work with shapes before actually getting into a diagram and working with the diagram. Also, remember that this will be on YouTube so that you can watch it at your own speed and take more notes if you want. I mean, the goal here is to show you what you can do with Visio, and then you go and work with it and watch the YouTube and go at your own pace. I'm going to go back to the home ribbon. I'm going to select the 3 shapes on the left. I'm going to go to the align button here, and it helps me align shapes if depending on which way I'm going, left, if I'm going vertical or horizontal. So in this case, if I want to align to the left of the line, imaginary guide, then I can choose that. I can do center, or I could do right, depending on what you want to do. So if I do center, it aligns those shapes so that the center of the shape is lined up. I'm going to do the same thing with the next 3. And in this case, because I want to do the same thing, I'm going to hit my F4 key. And my F4 key repeats what I just did. Now, if I want to align this way, I can select the 2 shapes, go to align and align middle, and then again, select these 2, F4, these 2, F4. Now, because the shapes are different and they're different styles, sometimes they don't look like they're lined up. The other thing you can do too is if you go to position, you can also, if you want to auto space or automatically space them or go to spacing objects, you can actually adjust the spacing between the objects if you want. And if they don't look like they're spaced to you, you can choose the auto space button to space them out. And if you wanted to, you could also auto align and use that button to work with the shapes. So depending on what it is that you want to do, if you want to distribute them and make sure that they're distributed, see how it moves the circle so that they're even, and then that way, again, I can hit F4 too, and that would distribute the shapes too. So, and then I have my center button. So I can center the drawing. After I've aligned them, I centered it, and now they look like they're better aligned and better positioned on the page for my drawing. So that's your align and position button. Remember though, you can also take these and add them to the quick access toolbar. So if there's a command that you use a lot and you like it on the toolbar so you don't have to worry about where it is, you can do that by right clicking. Now another thing that is new in 2013 is the change shape button. This is so nice. You do not have this in 2010, but in 2013, no matter what shape it is, if you click on the drop down arrow, you can change the existing shape that you selected to something else. So by hovering over it, you can pick. Now the choices that you are going to get in this is based off of the diagram that you choose. So if you've chosen the flowchart diagram, the shapes that would be in here would be the flowchart shapes. So it's based off of whatever diagram you choose. So if I decide to make that pick that shape, I can change it at any time, which is nice, because then you don't have to take the shape off the page and put another shape back in, especially if you've gone in and already formatted the shape, whatever, or added text to it. Now I'm going to talk about connecting shapes. So there's many ways that you can connect shapes. One of them is to select the shapes that you've selected, and then that connect shape button that I showed you, you can click on it and it will connect the shapes. Now sometimes based on the shape, if the arrow is crooked, it could be because the shapes aren't lined up. So you may have to move them, you may have to move them and drag them to get them lined up because they're not aligned. So you could use the alignment button for that. Now what it does is it connects the two shapes that I selected, and that's another reason why I like that button, which is not on the ribbon either. So the connect shape button is the one I added to the access toolbar. Another way to connect your shapes is to click on the connector button up here in the tools section of the home ribbon. When you do that and you move your mouse into your diagram, all of a sudden your mouse changes to a connector tool, and you'll notice that when you hover over shapes that you're going to see little connector points, and you can then take it, drag it to the next connector point of the shape that you want. So if I hover it over the triangle and the hexagon, I can see where my connector points are. I did notice in 2013 that they have made more connector points for the shapes so that you have more options. But just in case you wanted, like the triangle, what if you wanted a connector here, but there is no connector point here? You can add connector points. If you click on the X to the right of the connector, and then when you hover over the shape that you want to add the connector to, hold your control key down, notice the little plus to the right of my arrow, and when I click on the shape, all of a sudden I get a connector point. Then I can go to the connector tool, I can then hover over that connector that I just added and connect it to another connector on another shape. If you remember that the button is not changing to a pointer tool, so I can either hit the pointer tool button up here or hold my control key down and hit the number 1. You will notice that command, the control 1, you will use a lot. So now I've created my own connector and I've connected the two shapes. Now, the other thing with 2010 is when you do that, hold the control key and click, you have to do it twice. You do a control click and then you may have to do it again, control click again. The first time it doesn't take, but the second time it will, but in 2013 it takes after the first time. The other thing that is nice in here, and I'm going to just do the control A, I'm going to hit my delete key to remove all of the shapes. I am going to go ahead and drag a rectangle on my shape and go to the view ribbon. Another feature, and you may not notice that it's there because it's turned off by default. It's called Auto Connect. If I check the Auto Connect box here, and then I click on my shape, and I hover around the outside of the shape, and I don't know why it's not doing it. There it goes. Sometimes it doesn't do it right away. You kind of have to get it going. But once I click on the shape or hover over it, do you notice those little arrows that appear to the right of it? So if it gives you 4 options. So if I decided I wanted to circle, I could click on the circle, and then on the circle I get the little arrow, and I can go click on this other circle, well that's an oval, and click on the circle, and now what's happening is I'm actually connecting using the auto connect feature. So basically when I hover over the shapes, depending on what direction you want to go, you can just keep adding the same shape or pick a different shape, and it automatically connects those shapes as you go. Now, if I delete the oval here and let go, notice how the line automatically connects the 2. And if I add another shape to it, that's not a good one because that doesn't have very good connectors. Let's say I pick the square and I just put it on the line, it will automatically connect the 3 shapes, and the arrow is going in the direction that I want. So you can easily add shapes to the connectors or remove them and they'll reconnect themselves. This is why Visio is such a dynamic diagram program, because all of the work that you probably use working with SmartArt or the shapes in PowerPoint, when you're spending so much time working on diagrams because you have to redraw the line or whatever it is that you have to do, this will save you so much time, and this can be copied and pasted into PowerPoint. And actually if I hit the F5 key, it will go full screen, so that if I had a couple pages in my diagram, I could actually just go back and forth with that and then just go to each page individually. Now if I hit escape, it'll actually go back to my full screen, my diagram, so that I can work with it. Now, so that's the auto connect. Again, view, check auto connect, and then it'll work with your shapes. Now, I'm going to add 2 shapes. I'm going to add a triangle and I'm going to add a star to my diagram, just to talk a little bit about grouping and send to back, bring to front. So if I click on the star and then let's say I size it and then move it over. Again, if the shape has a yellow square, remember you can always change the shape of it just by clicking on the yellow square. And then I can send it to the back, I can bring it to the front. You can color the shape, so let's say I click on it and I change it to yellow, and then I click on the triangle and I change it to green. And then if I select both shapes, I can go to group and I can actually group them as one. Now that the shapes are grouped as one, I can move them anywhere I want. Control D is your duplicate shape command. So if you select a command and you hit Control D, it will duplicate the shape for you. And you can actually use that command instead of copy paste. It saves you a step. And if I like this shape and I want to save it on my stencil so that I can use it later, I am going to create a new stencil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to more shapes. I'm going to go down here to where it says new stencil, and then I am going to take that shape and drag it onto the page. Now, when you take a shape and drag it onto the stencil, it will remove it from the diagram. If you hold the Control key down and drag it, it will leave it on the diagram, and then it will move it here. It automatically, when you put it on, you can choose to put it above that line so it becomes part of the Quick Shapes command, or what you can do, which is actually right here because I have that scroll bar. Remember, I have a lot of stencils here. And then it automatically gives it a default name. So if you click once on that text that says Master 2 and you just type in a name for your shape, then you have your shape. Now you can see there's a little save button. So I'm going to save the stencil. I'm going to click on it. Now you could have it default to the Visio template My Shapes folder if you want. Or if you want, you can put it in a folder yourself where you keep your Visio diagrams, and you can just then name the stencil, and that way you know where it is, so you don't have to go looking for it. If I go to the insert ribbon, well, I'm going to do that later. So now I've had a shape, I created it, I've saved it on my stencil. So it's there for when I want to use it later. One of the things about these stencils here, if you save a diagram and then you close and open it, the next time you open it, all the stencils that were opened when you saved the diagram will appear when you open the diagram. So the next time you open it, these landmark shape stencils, your stencil, any other stencils that you brought up with that diagram will be there for that particular stencil. Diagram. If you start a new diagram, then you get the default stencils that come up. Also down below, notice that you have the pages. So you have multiple pages like you do in Excel. So you can add pages. There's a plus here. So you can add a new page if you want. And then you could have, for instance, if you had flowcharts and you wanted a flowchart here, flowchart marketing, flowchart HR, org chart marketing, org chart HR, you could keep them in your and then there's that fit to window button, which are fit page to current window, which I love because sometimes the page gets off kilter and you want to snap it back in the center of your page here, your screen, I should say. All right, so I'm going to close this particular diagram now. I don't need it anymore, so I'm going to close it, don't save it. And now I'm going to move on to an actual diagram. So I'm going to move on with all of that I just showed you, some of the basics with working with shapes. I'm going to go to a new template. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to New, and this one, there is a flowchart category here, which will just show me the flowchart diagrams. You have a cross-functional, you have your basic, you have a lot of different ones that you can actually choose from. So I'm going to go to the basic flowchart. I'm going to hit Create. It's going to bring up my basic shapes. Now, I noticed with these, they do have coloring. That's based off of the design, which we'll talk about if I hit Design. That is the office design, but there are other designs that you can choose from, which we can talk about later. Now what I want to do is the other thing I forgot to show you with shapes is if I drag a shape on a page and then drag another one out in the gray area, it automatically creates another page. So what happens with Visio is if you're creating a diagram and it starts to get too large or goes off the page here, it will create another page. Think of it like sheets in Excel. When you're in Excel, you're on sheet 1, but you can have multiple pages on that sheet. So if you have a lot of information, when you print it, you can have page 1, 2, 3, 4. The same with Visio. You could have multiple pages for diagrams that would flow. So depending on what size paper you're working with, you can change that. Now you can also change by right-clicking on the page down here and going to page setup. You will get your adjustment where you can do a fit to page. You can change the page from portrait to landscape, and then you can go in and you can change some other things with the actual diagram by going to page setup. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some shapes. Now, when you're working with flowcharts, they actually have meaning. So based on what you're doing, you can drag the particular shapes here. If I drag the process shape on the page, I have the change shape button, and notice that the shape choices that I have are the flowchart shapes. So they're not the other shapes that you saw earlier. It's based off the diagram that I just selected. Before I drag this shape onto my page, I am going to do something, and a little trick here is to click on the connector tool before I drag the shapes onto the page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on process and drag it here, and now I'm going to decide another process, and as I drag it here, watch what happens. It's connecting as I drag it onto the page. So now if I go to decision, move that over here, it's connecting. If I bring up, say, sub-process here, now we can change this later. It's not, for some reason, in it started that when I drag it, instead of going from here to here, it went from here to here. But I can change that connector later. I don't want to do that now because my mouse is a connector tool. And if I do it, I'll add another connector, and I don't want to worry about that right now. I can easily change that later. I'm going to bring up the data one. What's important is before you drag the next shape on the page, make sure that the shape you're connecting to is selected. So that if this was not selected and I went in and dragged another shape here, it would not connect because I haven't selected the shape that I'm connecting to. I can also go over here and add a shape, click here and add a shape, click here and add a shape going down. So depending on what it is that I'm connecting to, I can automatically, so I'm just going to delete these two. Click there, make sure it's selected, and then add the start end down here. Now, Control 1 turns off back to pointer tool. I'm going to take this line here, and I'm actually going to, whoops, I don't want that, so I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to get that pointer tool, I'm going to get that connector, and I'm going to drag it. No, I don't know why it's not doing it. It does this all the other time. Let's get this one. Maybe I don't have it right. I can't see it. Okay, there it is, the circle. If I take the circle and move it, now you can see that it automatically connected it the way I wanted it to. So now I automatically have, and if you remember, I could add, if I needed to add another shape, I could just drag it right on the line and it'll automatically connect itself. So now I have the shape. If I forgot something, I can take any shape and I can just add it and it'll just connect to that diagram very quickly. If I delete it, it goes back to. So now I talked about the change shape. I'm going to go to the design ribbon. Oh, and the center button, center drawing. Click on center drawing. It just centered my drawing. Now, because I did change that, it messed up my arrow again. So I'm going to just click there and drag that connector back so it reconnects the way I wanted it to. You will notice that you do have different designs that you can choose from based off of, so you can just kind of quickly hang over those if you want. Or you can just stay with the Microsoft, or you can do your own. So you can do your own color schemes, whatever you want. Now, over here, there's a re-layout button. And the reason I wanted to show you that is because even though it laid it out in the way you put it on the page, if you want to change the direction of the flow chart, you can actually hover over the different layouts and you can see how it changes the direction of it, the look of it, and it's quick. And I don't have to move things around, and you can actually relay it out. The other thing you can do is you can go to connectors and you can make them straight, you can make them more curved, and you can go back to right angled. So that's another thing you can do with the connectors versus the shapes. Now I'm going to quickly add text to this. So I'm going to type this. I'm going to type Visio training in this box. In here, I'm going to say email students. Here's my fit to window button, which I like. I'm going to click here and type meeting. It always throws it off when you type. The create handouts. I'm going to click here and tally emails. And then over here, I'm going to say train. Another thing I can do is I can type on a connector. A lot of people don't realize that, you know, they can just start typing on a connector. So I can say call Susan to schedule time. Or maybe you want this to say phase 3 or phase 2 or step 1, step 2. Just start typing on the connector and it'll put the text on the line. Now, if I do the Control A for the shape to select them all and I go home, I can, you know, increase the size of the text. I can change the color of the text. Again, remember, you can always go to more colors, standard, and pick whatever color you want from the prism box. You can make it bold. And I'm just going to click here. And now I formatted all of my text. Now, the other thing you can add is under More Shapes, if you go to the Visio Extras, there's something called, or you could search too, annotations or callouts. So if I go to annotations, that pulls up the little callouts. So if I take one of these and drag it, it'll snap right to a connector point, and then I could, click here and say, get email addresses from Jane, or whatever you want to put in there. And then it also has, the annotations will also have some regular text boxes that you can just add and type in there if you want. And if you go to my More Shapes and you go to Visio Extras callouts, then you get some other types of styles of callouts that you can choose from. You get starburst, you can get little other callouts over here that you can choose from, like this, and then again, you can just connect it and just start typing depending on what you choose. Now, if I want something from my stencil, how do you bring up the stencil that you created? Well, you go to More Shapes, Open Stencil. See, there's a difference. There's the diagram, and then there's the stencils. So I'm going to click on this Open Stencil button. I'm going to go back to my desktop because that's where I put my stencil. And I am going to, oh, you know what, I think it came over here. Hold on for a minute. Where did the stencil go? I thought I saved it on the desktop. Oh, I can't find it. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. So let me do the new one. I'm going to go New Stencil. I'm going to name it. Put a shape on there. I'm just going to put that shape on there. I'm going to save it. I'm going to let it default. So I'm going to say here, hit save. I'm actually going to close it. So I'm going to right click and close it. And then I'm going to go to More Shapes, go to Open Stencil. There it is. So again, if you can't find it, you can always store it back in the stencil window because it'll go right to this anyways. And I'll hit open. And then I could take that. So if this was the one I had with the tree, I could take this and drag it right on there. So I just opened up my stencil. So now what I'm going to do is going to insert. I'm going to go to picture, and I'm going to bring in my picture that I had from logo. And so I took my logo and I'm going to, let's say I put it here and I'm going to put it in the corner. And then if I want to, I could hold my control key down and drag that logo onto the stencil. But the first time you do it, it's going to tell you it's read only. Would you like to edit? Say yes. There it is, logo. And now when I close the diagram, let's say I close the diagram, what you have to be careful of is that you have to, the first thing it's going to ask you if you want to save Michelle, the stencil. So I want to hit save because anything you did on the stencil, you want it to save. And do you want to save the drawing? Yes, I want to save the drawing. So I'm going to save the drawing under Documents. And I'm going to go ahead and call it flowchart. So now I can go to File. If I want, I can go to Open, and there it is under Recent, and I can click on it and open it up, and it's there. And there's my stencils that were open when I opened the diagram. So those stencils that I had open when I closed it come up when I open it. Now let's say I want to format the connectors connecting the flowchart, and then I want to format the boxes, but I want to do it separately. Or maybe the annotations you want to format separately. So there's a little trick to this. If you go up here on the home ribbon to under select and you choose select by type, with the flowchart there are different layers, and you'll notice there's a connector and the annotations. So if I check annotations and hit OK, let's say I want to change the text color in there. Maybe I want to make it bigger. Maybe I want to change the font. So I could do that. If I go to select by type, and I go to layer and I check connector and I hit OK. Right now, the lines, the connector lines, are the only thing that's selected. So you do not want to click anywhere after you do this. Up here, I'm going to go to the Shape Styles line. I'm going to go to Line Options. And in 2013, it brings up the Format Shape window. In 2010, it brings up a Format Line dialog box. So if I want to change the color of the line, if I want to change the thickness of the line, or whatever it is that you want to change, if I want to change the end arrow shape, and I want to make it larger, now if I click away, it only formatted the lines. So I don't have to sit there and manually select each line individually, or hold my shift key down to, or control key down to select all the lines separately. The other thing, if I go to select by type, if I do layer flowchart, OK, that's only going to select the boxes or the shapes. So if I go to fill options, then over here I can change the color of the boxes if I want. I can oh, it's actually fill. Sorry, I was in the line part. I could go to gradient and pick gradient styles. I can choose how I want it to select. I can choose the direction, you know, all that fun stuff. I don't want to spend too much time on this. You can make the boxes more transparent if you want. And then if I close it, I quickly format the boxes separately from the connectors. Now there is a design ribbon. Like I mentioned earlier, you can choose from, if you hit more, you can hover over the different styles, but basically it keeps the, if you design it, it tries not to overwrite some of the things that you've done, like the shading and that. So you can see that now when I hover over the different design templates, it does a little bit of formatting, but it kind of keeps some of the stuff that I did. So if you want to strictly use that without don't format it first before you use design. And I could quickly undo if I wanted to. F5 again will bring up the whole diagram. Escape will take me back. Now, before I get into the org chart, and if you can stay with me a little longer so I can show you some tricks with the org chart, quickly, there is a background button here. If I pick one of the backgrounds, it applies it to that page, and I now have a background page. There are two types of pages in Visio, backgrounds and foregrounds. So if I want to change the background color of this and click on it, go to Home, go to Fill, maybe I'll pick that, and so I'll pick the orange. Oops. Where's the orange? Okay. Anything I do here affects that page. So if I cut this logo out and I paste it on this background page, think of it as a master in PowerPoint. Your background pages are like your master slides. So if I go back to page 1, anything I do on the background page, it's going to affect that. So if I call this flow chart, and let's say I add another page. So now I have another page, and notice that it's using this background. If I right click on it and I go to page setup, this says this is a foreground page. That's the page that I'm putting the diagram on. It is using the world as the background. So I can choose none and hit OK. So for this one, I could use the world, and this one, I could create another background. You can move your realign your pages, your foreground pages, but you cannot realign your background. The background pages you cannot move up. They stay at the end of the list. So if I create a diagram on here and I want to use that background, go to page setup and tell it what background page you want to use. And again, we could get more into some of this stuff later in another time. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to, now you'll notice over here there is a cross-functional flowchart shape stencil, but I actually want to use the cross-functional flowchart shape diagram. So I'm going to close this particular diagram right now and save it. I'm going to go to File, New, and under Flowchart, I'm going to click on the cross-functional, and then I'm going to hit Create, and now I get swim lanes. So if I want, remember I can hit the connector, I can drag this over, and I can actually drag this here, and it's going to connect as I do it. And if I run out of phases, I can actually take a swim lane and drag it out. And I can also create a separator. It just snaps into place for phases. Now the other thing is that I get a cross-functional tab at the top. And I can use that to automatically change the orientation to vertical if I decide I want to move it to vertical, even though I chose horizontal when I created it. If I take a swim lane out, let's say I select the swim lane here and hit delete, it will remove the shapes on that lane. So anything in that lane it will remove. So some of you who work with these types of flowcharts, this particular diagram will have and then you can hide the title if you don't want the title. So there's certain functions that come with this diagram that if you would have just chosen the stencil, you wouldn't have had the ribbon up at the top. All right, I know we're running out of time here, so I am going to quickly do a new organizational chart. So I'm going to pick that, just kind of show you some basics with that. I'm going to hit the org chart, hit create. This one tries to go into a wizard. If you're using 2010, it doesn't go into a wizard. So I'm going to hit cancel. I am going to get the org chart ribbon up here. You can see up at the top. And then I get the stencils over here on the left. This particular one, I'm going to do the executive one, the top cheese, he's going to the top. Then what I'm going to do is I'm only going to use the multiple shapes button, and I'm going to drag that on top of the main box. It's going to ask me how many of these do I want. I'm going to say 5 and hit OK. By doing that, you're going to see, now if I want, I can move that over a little bit because it went off the page, it created a new page. You can see that I have my levels here. In 2013, it automatically adds the pictures. So if you do the, well, I'll show you after I add the next group, you can hide the pictures if you don't want pictures. Now I'm going to take the multiple shape, drag it over the first box. I'm going to do 4 and hit OK. And now I have 4 going down. What I like about it is I'm only using these 2 buttons, executive and multiple. Now if I want to move this group over, there's a move button, and I can take them. I have to click on the top one and move them over. If I click here and hit my delete key, I hit relayout. So there's a relayout button here on the org chart ribbon. These are all the commands for the org chart. So it snaps together in place. You could also Control A and you can increase and decrease the width and height. You can show hide to take off the pictures if you want. If you do want to insert a picture, just go to Insert Picture and choose that person, and now you have that person's picture here. You can also change the shape styles if you want. You can, one of the things you can do here where it says shapes, if you click on the drop down arrow, the little button here to bring up the dialog box, you can go to fields and you can actually choose what fields. You notice it has name here. If you don't want that here, you could choose none, and then you can choose name, and you can say I want to see name at the top, title, department. When you hit OK and yes, it does that. See, the box that says name, title, department for each one. Now, one of the things they took away in 2013, and I'm a little disappointed in this, is that when you're in the display options box in 2010, you actually have a text tab where you can format all the names and make them red. You can format the actual fields that are here so that like all the titles can be blue, all the names can be red, they can be 10 point. You can format them, and it formats the field. But I can't, it doesn't exist in 2013 anymore. Now, you can also select a box and you can change the position. So if I want to make this person a manager, you know, I didn't do that when I was first creating this. I just picked position and then I can change it later. Now I can also, if I want, select this main group, and over here, if I want, I can go to layout and I can change the layout of that group underneath. So now if I take multiple shapes and drag it over here and I go to position, and let's say I pick 2, and then now that one's going to be larger, but if I say I go here and I choose layout, I want to click on the manager. I'm going to make him a manager now, and then I can go to layout and I can change it to that. So as I go, and then I have my center drawing button to center it. Or if you click on the main one and move it up, notice that it drags the whole thing up too. And then on the design ribbon, you can pick the design too for it. Another thing you can do too, which is nice, is that you can go in and you can say, okay, click on this main person, go over here to where it says synchronize to a new page. Now I'm going to click here and I'm going to synchronize this to a new page. So now I have 3 pages, one with everybody, and if I hit F5, there's all of them. I can click here and I can click here, and it's like a PowerPoint presentation. So you can link it to Visio, and then you can run this like it was 3 separate slides. And you can then also, if you want, you can click on a box on the main page and you can hit show hide subordinates, and that actually shows and collapses anybody that's a manager so that you're just seeing the manager and not the whole group. So that's a nice cool feature in Visio. And then if you want to format the boxes separately from the lines, if you go, this is kind of back home, you go to select by type. One of the things you'll notice is there's no layers for org charts. But, and I don't know how I figured this out, if I uncheck shapes and click OK, it has just selected, and by doing that, I uncheck shapes, only the boxes are selected. So if I go to fill and I pick a color, and then let's say I go in here and I'll pick that color and I do some formatting to it, notice that it's only applying it to the boxes. Now if I go to select by type, and I uncheck everything except shapes, that selects only the lines, the connectors. So if I go to line, and let's say I change the line color, let's say I go here and change the weight, maybe you want to change the arrow designs, and I click away, notice that it just did the connectors. So I don't know why it works, but it does. So select by type, shapes, if you uncheck shapes, it's the boxes only. If you uncheck everything else and just check shapes, it's the connectors. It works. Now, if I go to design, I drag a background onto the page. I pick this background. I can use that background down there, or you can create your own backgrounds if you want. And since we're running out of time, I'm going to end this session. As I mentioned, we can do another Visio class down the road where we can do some more diagrams, such as there's some interesting ones. There's a brainstorming diagram, which is nice, which also has a legend that you can use in other diagrams. There's a new feature in Visio called containers, and you can use that with the diagrams. You can do timelines, which are really nice, and calendars, working more with creating your own backgrounds. On the insert ribbon, as you said, there's containers. You can do callouts. Well, there's a callouts here. And then there's some other things that you can do. One of the things with the org chart was you can import from an Excel spreadsheet and create an org chart that way. And we could start out with that one the next time. So since this is only an hour, but I hope there was a lot of information in today's session, but I hope you enjoyed and learned some tips today with working with Visio, and hope to see you next time. Thank you very much for participating today. And if you have any questions at the end today, if you need to, I can answer them. But I hope you enjoy your day. Thank you.